Hello and welcome to the Change Exchange, where my guest today, Nicola Kleyn, just the other day appointed as the head of GIBS, the business school. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ruda. It's lovely to be here. I had to explain to somebody the other day what a dean is. Somebody said to me, what does it mean to be a dean? I said, well, you look after a business and you look after a school. It's a great privilege.
You're the boss of a school.
Well, I think there are a lot of people who think they're the boss of me, but yes, I suppose in essence it's about being the boss of a school.
Did you always want to be in the business sphere? You studied BCom and then went on from there?
I didn't know what I wanted to be.
I
didn't know what I wanted to be. There was a period in my life when I was at school and I knew I wanted to do something. You know, I didn't have these sort of dreams of becoming a ballet dancer or some of the stereotypical girl dreams. And I still remember a family friend saying, you're very good at maths and science. You should go into physiotherapy. That's a really good career for a girl. Okay. And at that point, something in me going, there's something wrong with this, but I haven't figured it out. I was very lucky. I went to an all-girls school and there was never a gender agenda. You were just encouraged to be the best person you could be. It wasn't relevant, but that stuck with me. And then a couple of months later, actually in school, Wendy Lucas Bull came and presented at the school about the stock exchange game. And I guess it was a game. I realized business is a game. This sounds cool. And then I went and studied commerce and I was offered a bursary by an accounting company, an auditing company. And my father said to me, I'm not sure that you would be the best auditor and we can actually afford to pay for you. We were very lucky. So why don't you keep studying? And then I encountered marketing and I thought, I can do this. I've been consuming since the day I came out of the womb. I relate to this and started studying marketing, a bit of finance at the same time because you've got to fund this stuff. And then, yeah, that was the getting into business piece.
And then you did an MBA and a DBA. So when did you decide I'm going the academic route?
Oh, I didn't. I oscillated. I think life sometimes is about these, you decide one thing and then you go, maybe this isn't working, and you come back. You realize in retrospect you've actually done a spiral, not just, you know, moving from one to the other. I was doing my honours.
Sorry, but it kind of, you have to learn that that's okay. You don't have to have a 10-year plan and follow it to the letter.
We should come back and talk about that because there was a point at which I think I was quite desperate with the corporate world and I had to make what I thought was a very conscious decision to say, I do not choose a career, I choose interesting work. It was very liberating. I'm going to do the work that interests me, and if that means that I'm not going to become, as most good marketers did, a brand manager at Unilever and worry about margarine sales, well then that's what I'm going to choose. But it's a hard choice when everybody around you is going one route to say that actually I've got to do what ultimately works for me. I mean, that's part of it. But there was that oscillation. So at university, I enjoyed that environment. Universities are a magnificent place for curious people, and I'm intensely curious. But at the same time, when you're in a university, there's a sense of those who can do, those who can't teach, should I get out there and do? And in retrospect, isn't it ironic that those choices about being both at WITS at that point, doing an MBA, and teaching, and then going into the real world and joining Investec, and then making a decision to come back into academia have been wonderful because when we started, it's a business school and there's business and there's school in it.
What's the best thing about teaching? What do you like about teaching?
It's not the teaching, it's about the power of the learning. So
you see yourself as an enabler.
Exactly. You know, there's an interesting progression that happens quite often with faculty, particularly, and it really is not the best thing because we haven't been trained as teachers. You start off as a subject matter expert, and in some countries, actually, this has been very strongly regulated. That says, how can you, you know, let subject matter experts onto classes? You've got to actually understand pedagogy and andragogy.
Where have you ever found a mathematician who can actually talk to young people?
Who can talk. and there's a sense of, certainly for me in the beginning, there's a potency in teaching. You stand up there and you hold a class sway and people go, wow, and you want to be better and better at it. And then at some point you have to put that ego to one side and go, actually, this is so not about me. And this is so about where people need to go. It's also in a business school environment, it's a privilege because we work with post-experienced students. The deep respect for the knowledge that they bring into the room and the experience means that your job is really to work with what is in the room, not to teach anybody anything.
You were with Investec, but in a kind of teaching environment or not? You were head of their training?
Of what was called the business school. So for me it was a very strange environment. I decided it was time to leave the university, and Investec in those days, and I think still today, had a very rigorous interview process. And I went to go and speak to a recruitment consultant and said, I'd like to do something. And they said, well, why don't you become an executive assistant? And I thought, those words just don't sound good.
Oi.
In retrospect, it was a great job, but it just didn't sound right. And then they said, we've got a position at Investec, but it's in human resources. And I said, well, I don't know anything about human resources. Really, you know, that wouldn't be for me. And they said, well, you know, we'd like to send your CV across to them. And in fact, I think that the mandate came from quite high up, that Investec, being Investec, didn't want somebody who had an expertise in human resources to be in learning and development. They preferred the idea that I'd been in a client support, you know, the client facing and marketing, and they wanted that logic because internal services is very much around these are your clients and how do we look after those clients. So it was bringing that logic in, and I wasn't appointed to run the business school. After I think it was about a year, I got offered the position, and it was very much an intermediated environment. So what would happen is you would have clients on one hand, your Investec people who needed learning solutions or training, and we would go to the market and look for providers of that. But a remarkable environment. I learned an awful lot at Investec. I really did. I'm profoundly grateful for the opportunities I had there. But you can't stay in the same place forever.
And then you were on maternity leave, I think, when you got a call.
Well, then actually, I guess before then, I had my first baby. So for some people, this is maybe quite handleable, and they can insert babies into their lives. It didn't happen for me. And I probably, in retrospect, made a mistake that I was very logical about this change. I knew that this baby was going to arrive. I actually had a planned cesarean, so I finished work. I remember distinctly going to the shops to get some things and knowing I was going into hospital the next day and thinking, I will just handle this because that is the way it works. And postnatal depression stuck.
Oh, no.
Horrible, horrible postnatal depression. And I don't think I realized it at the time.
How long ago? How many years?
So this was 16 years ago.
No, people didn't really know about postnatal depression then.
It
wasn't easily diagnosed.
I think that you know, people would say you're a bit blue, or there was just this sense of I'm not coping, which in retrospect wasn't me.
Were you back at work yet?
No.
No.
So I was sitting at home thinking, I can't go back to Investec. I cannot do this. This is such a high performance environment, and feeling a gross sense of inadequacy. To Investec's credit, they really, I had a phone call from the chairman who said to me, we would love you to come back. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I just can't. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then I had a phone call from Nick Benadell. And he said to me, he knew me from my Wits days. He said to me, I'm starting a school. And I went, oh, that sounds interesting. He said, yes, I've sold an MBA to a whole group of people off a business model. We're frantically building, and we start with our first MBA class in January next year. This was in about the November. And would you come and teach marketing in April? And isn't it amazing how, you know, sometimes you just make a decision, you don't know where you're going, but doors open, and the rest is a long history, but history.
And it's also sometimes if you close one door, then it's as if other possibilities open up, not only in reality, but also in your head.
I think what you're saying is so important, because so often we focus in life on what do you choose to do. What I realize, and it's reinforced every day in the new role, what are you choosing to not do? And I think what we say no to is often more important than what we say yes to, and being able to be conscious of that.
It must have been an absolutely wonderful growth experience to grow with the new school. I mean, you had hopes that it would become something great, but you couldn't know.
It's been remarkable from the perspective of you only realize when you get to the position that I've got into now, and I speak to people, I was a faculty member. So I was, my intense focus was on making sure that people were learning in my classes. And in fact, the development of the school and the strategic decisions actually were not that much on my radar. And I think that's part of the genius that was the founding dean, because he didn't make these things everybody's problem. He knew the role that people needed to play, and he wanted to give them as much autonomy as possible to play that role. And that was different to my experience at Wits University, which was then certainly quite regulated in terms of what you could do and who you could teach and how you approach things. And so it was this remarkable now taking over the school and having conversations, and in the last couple of years since I moved into senior management, hearing other people's narrative about their experiences of what happened. There was always a sense of urgency, a sense of the environment is, the time is now. You need to move. This opportunity to start this school is now, and it will not be there in a year's time. And in fact, when the dean stepped down, we gave him a statue of a cheetah, because if I had to say in one word for me, what was Nick about? It was about fast. So it's good choices, but you move fast. Can't wait.
And what did he teach you, do you think, that you are taking forward with you now?
I think there have been multiple lessons across the years. One of my lessons from Nick was he had a profound focus on if you mess something up, I want to know about it before anybody else. And I remember one day teaching a class, and I was very uncomfortable with my performance. I had tried to do way too much. And I thought, well, let me go and tell him before he hears about this from anybody else. I went and knocked on his door, and I said to him, well, Nick, I've messed up this class. I don't think I've done very well. And he said to me, you know, it's not about you, it's about them. And we got into a wonderful conversation about how do you push your boundaries? How do you change the way that you've always done something? And one of the things he said to me is, you know, Nicola, sometimes when you try something new, you've just got to really jump. I hadn't. I think I'd been raised to be quite risk averse. I'd been raised to not try things unless I knew I was going to be good at them. Well, I had made those choices. I had decided that I would choose to perform in areas where I could succeed. And sometimes you've got to be brave enough to know this is what needs doing. The beauty, I think, is as I've emerged from an academic career, which is very much, it's lonely. It's you on the stage. It's you doing the research. The joy is a team. The joy is this is not about me. This is about we, and we can do this. It's very empowering. So I think for Nick, that sense of momentum, of take a risk, of the brave choices against my quite prudent background has been good for me.
What's in it for us as a community, as a society, as a country? What is Gibbs bringing?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's a question that if we're not mindful of, we lose the essence and the potency. So we are unashamedly about business and responsible business performance. And I think since the financial crisis, the role and purpose of business has been under question. The notion that business should always operate the way it has, that the purpose of business is to make a profit only and serve its shareholders only, really has been fundamentally questioned. But if we look at where we are in the time that we're at, if we look at in the country that we're at, in the continent on which we reside, the need to be a facilitator of economic growth that doesn't just enrich shareholders is profound.
The whole idea of inclusive growth.
It's inclusive growth, and it's about us being quite clear about the role that we want to play, but a profound philosophy that says inclusive growth is going to happen because of individuals and because of organizations. So as a school, we need to work on that individual level with people to question, to innovate, to critique, to debate, to discuss, but ultimately to perform. Because it's all very well sitting on the sidelines and debating. If you don't get out there and do, and one of my colleagues made a lovely comment the other day. He said we need to teach the actors how to think and the thinkers how to act. And I think there's that role. But also the role of organizations and institutions, not only in South Africa, but across the continent, that are committed to building better societies. And through that, satisfying multiple stakeholders. It is the most profoundly exciting place to be. You know, we have 13,000 business schools in the world. We can't figure out how many are in Africa, but we think it's about 50. If we look at the growth of the population, the growth of organizations, the growth of business, we have got so much work to do.
Just back to your specific field, your marketing experience. Has marketing in South Africa changed since '94?
I think there are two kinds of change. I think there's the change that's in your face change, where you go, this is a big change. And obviously a shift to democracy meant, we spoke just now about inclusion, meant for marketers, new markets, exciting markets. And so you couldn't be a marketer in this country and not go, there's going to be a significant shift in, particularly on a consumer side, who we serve and who is going to have the income.
Black middle class. Yeah, so you need little black kids and...
Well, we had this, you know, in some ways I think a naivety. So there was this, the black diamonds, there have been all sorts of terms used. But that change really came about as a result of significant political change. But at the same time, of course, there are those incremental changes that you experience, but you don't experience them as a big slap in the face until, of course, you realize you've missed an opportunity. And I think those changes for marketers are more about social media, democratization of consumers, the fact that a brand manager suddenly realizes they don't control
the conversation.
They are the custodian of the brand, but ultimately to build the best brand, your customers are going to go, this is ours. We have the power to shape this. And so, interestingly, this theme of democratization, the Arab Spring, has filtered through into the marketing environment, where if we do not respect the individual and collective power of customers, I think we're dead in the water. But it's taking a few people a while to realize it.
But that will mean that a lot of the training that was done 15 years ago is almost irrelevant, because the field is so completely different.
But full stop, that's not just marketing. I mean, that's management. The way we lead organizations now, the way we obtain buy-in, the notion of who has power. That's not just about marketing. I think we have to fundamentally question, starting with the purpose of business and what are we trying to do as businesses, extending to our business models. So the model that may have worked to generate profitability 10 years ago is not going to work in the same way today. And then through to our styles of leadership, our engagement, a workforce who is, or employees who in one way, I hear these two narratives. The one says, your younger employees will only work a 40-hour week, so don't expect them to do more. And on the other hand, we look at the notion of crowdsourcing and employees who are online in other businesses, contributing amazing ideas, in many cases not being paid for it. This is, we need to make sense of the fact that people have far more choices today, and they're going to exercise them. And if we're not the place that people want to engage with, we're in trouble. There's that lovely story that you may have heard about, and it's sort of done in the typical South African style, about a farmer who goes off to go and visit his cousin or his brother who's immigrated to Australia, and he says to him, how big are these farms here? And of course they're 100, 1,000 times the size of the South African farms. He's farming sheep, and he says, how on earth do you keep these sheep in? What do you do about fencing? And he says, no, we don't fence here. We drill wells. And the analogy is, if you don't drill a well and have people want to be at your well, fences aren't going to work anymore. You better drill wells.
It's a wonderful story. Getting slightly more personal, you met your husband while you were both doing MBA. That's not the usual image of MBA.
Well, I don't know. If you chatted to our students, Ruda, you might find something quite different. Luckily, we were both single. There was a small story, because in MBA interviewing we take things very seriously, and that's where I did my MBA, certainly did. And I had to go for interviewing. I was very young when I did the MBA, and at main campus they'd said to me, you have to do a master's, and I thought, I just can't face doing one of these dissertations. So they said to me, you better trot across to the business school, see if they'll take you. And so I had to go through quite an extensive interviewing process, and there was a professor there who looked at me very seriously, and he said to me, why do you want to do an MBA? And I just looked at him and I thought, I can't face answering this question. I smiled at him and I said, because I'm looking for a husband. I found one. And I finished and he didn't. That's the funny story about it. He went off to start his own business, because in those days the MBA really did not cater for entrepreneurs. It was designed to help people get ahead in big business. And I think things have profoundly shifted on that landscape. I would like to think that if he was doing his MBA today, he'd get huge value out of it. But the rest, as they say, is history. So I stayed in academia, and he went off and did the entrepreneurship thing.
And now you have two very busy lives. How does one keep a relationship going?
A lot of trust, and trust in the sense of, we only realized recently, I think, that we had divided up roles without doing any formal role allocation. I mean, we had wonderful job descriptions in business, but I don't know that we do them in our private lives. And letting go of a whole lot of assumptions. So certainly when I got married, there were assumptions that said that, you know, men did this and women did this in relationships.
And that was the model in your head.
That was the model in my head. And the realization, for example, that as I had children, I don't think I'm particularly nurturing. I think as a mother, I'm a very strong mother, but I'm not the mother that the kids necessarily come to with their deepest, darkest problems. They might be a lot more likely to go to my husband with that. There's stuff I like doing, and there's stuff that I really don't like and I'm lousy at. So Russell does the accounts and a lot of the detail stuff. I like food, so I do a lot of stuff with food. But in all seriousness, I think every marriage needs to find its own footing in terms of who's going to play what role. And then there's this wonderful joy of seeing your children get older and realizing that they are just becoming these incredible people in their own right, and that your role is to create an enabling environment. So it shifts from this, I am responsible for your well-being, to I'm here to enable your well-being.
Yes. I'm not bringing you up.
Yes, exactly. We're not dragging you up. We're not bringing you up. Actually, you do that for yourself. But would you like to talk to me about some of the choices that you face and how you might want to make them? And if you don't, I have to let that go. That's also part of kids growing up. So it is busy. I guess one of the compromises has been that I don't do social side on his work, and he really doesn't do a lot of social side on my work, because I think we just never have time for each other and for family. We
came to exactly the same compromise, that it was just too much.
Yeah.
You go your way, I'll go my way.
Yeah.
It has changed now a little bit because I work less, so I'm more available. But you can't.
And isn't it interesting how we have to recognize that we go through these changes and phases in our lives, and we need to and we must relook. So my youngest is 13. She started weekly boarding. And so suddenly we're at home in the week. And so we sort of struck this deal. Well, I'll do 2 to 3 evening events a week. We'll make sure that there's at least one night a week when it's just the two of us. And then kids come home on the weekend, and that is fantastic. But I've had to change, because I used to do quite a lot of work on the weekend. Now I'm going, I really want to try and avoid that. So there's some late nights and early mornings, but I think being conscious and being in the moment about what we're doing, and they grow fast.
And your home, how long have you lived there?
Not very long. We have moved home quite often.
For a reason, or just because it happened?
We've moved because initially we made a choice to move to a slightly smaller home, and then it wasn't big enough, so then we moved again. And that was quite rough for me, because I grew up perhaps confusing a house with a home. Home is where your family are and where you choose to be, and really, I think, be a very true self. And what I've realized is that's not located to the geography of it and a building. And I can thank my husband for that. He said to me one day, home is where my pillow is. I'm not sure I'm there yet. And we're moving again. So we're moving closer to Gibbs, because anybody navigating Joburg traffic and being mindful of their time, you know, knows how tough that is. And so my family are being amazing, because we've stayed quite close to my youngest child's school, and she finished in grade 7. And I went, it's my turn now. Now we're going to move to where I want to live. So they're indulging me. I'm profoundly grateful.
And if you're house hunting, what do you look for? Space, light, pretty trees?
Gardens are important. They don't have to be big. But I think as I get older, what becomes so important are some of these very fundamental things. Beautiful trees. Yeah, the role of nature in that becomes important. And then, of course, the notion of taking into account what stage is my family at. So I sit with 4 children. The oldest 2 are 24 and 22. They come and go. The youngest.
But you want them to have a spot.
I want them to be able to, on one hand, I don't want to rattle around in a mausoleum during the week. I need to be able to come and know it's fit for purpose for that, and that it can expand on weekends. There's this lovely thing in marketing called occasion marketing. It says you don't just think about a consumer as a consumer. So it's not about, let's use an example. It says, if I say to a consumer, what do you drink? They'll look at me and go, lots of things. But what do you drink in the morning with breakfast? And what do you drink when it's Friday afternoon and you're celebrating the end of a good work week? And those are different. And so our lives are made up of these series of occasions. And they shift, and they change, and we change. But my house needs to be the prop to support those occasions as they stand now. That's kind of where we're at. A little bit of quiet time as well. It's busy at Gibbs. It's a marketplace. So I need to be able to come home and have some silence.
I hope you find the perfect place. And all the very, very, very best for your new role.
Thank you, Ruda. Thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you for making time.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you for being with us. Goodbye.